Hello, and welcome to the World Storytelling Cafe, where there are so many amazing storytellers doing such an important work. And I'm honored to be here. My name is Polina Tserakssova, and as you can hear from my name, which in my native language sounds as Polina Tserakssova, I am Russian. I'm a real Russian storyteller. Have you seen one before? Cool, eh? But my dear native home country is Estonia. Have you been there before? Cool, eh? So later I'm going to tell you more about both my origin and my home country. And that's why I speak fluently both languages and doing storytelling in both Estonian and Russian. And I am a musician, storyteller and anthropologist. Now, musicians, they play music. And you can see all these instruments around me. And I hope that they will tell their stories soon. Anthropologists, they travel a lot. They do ethnographic fieldwork. They learn from another culture. And that's what I did also. And you just have to believe this. I did most of my fieldwork in the Middle East. And I'm a storyteller. But there's a question. What do storytellers do? Well, that's easy, you say. They tell stories. Like all these amazing people here in the World Storytelling Cafe. They tell stories, you say. And that's where I would roll my eyes, if I were a person who rolls her eyes. Because for the last 10 years of my life as a storyteller, I've been trying to understand what it is that I'm doing. What is it that storytellers do? Because you see, everyone tells stories nowadays. Politicians, managers, photographers, filmmakers, everyone on the social media. They all tell stories. So I was thinking a lot about what is it so special that storytellers do? And usually I have many questions. But this time I had the answer. And I'm going to share it with you now. I'm going to tell you one of my own stories, which is called Who is a Storyteller? Well, that's easy. That's the most ordinary person who lives in a tiny house, in front of which there is a big pomegranate tree. And under this tree, there sits a fluffy cat playing a Turkish rebab. By the way, this instrument is called the Turkish rebab. The tree bears many juicy pomegranates, which are picked in winter. So the storyteller puts her warm clothes on. She goes through the snowdrifts towards the tree. She reaches out her hand to pick the first fruit. And suddenly, a tiny, yellow, but butterfly lands on her hand. The storyteller looks at it and listens. This winter, the pomegranates stay untouched. Many people think that the storyteller is always talkative and that she's always telling jokes and stories and legends and anecdotes. But in fact, the storyteller is rather silent and she loves to listen more. But sometimes she finds herself in a place where everyone is expecting for some kind of miracle from her. And then someone will come and surely say, "Ah, you're a storyteller. Well then, tell us a story then." And maybe the storyteller wanted to share one of her stories. But sometimes it happens that not a single story wants to be told. Everyone has to leave without a story, because stories are free souls. The storyteller loves a good laugh, and she also loves good jokes. And she knows that only the people who have experienced deep sorrow can really make good and amazing jokes. That's why all clowns used to be sad some time ago. But the storyteller knows that laughter makes your life longer. And she also knows that nervous cells are not restored. Well, that's even good. Because if the nervous cells are not restored, then only peaceful cells will remain then. The storyteller knows that most of the people are always waiting for something. They're waiting the whole week for weekends to come, or they're waiting the whole month for holidays to come, or they're waiting the whole year for summer to come, or they're waiting the whole their life when they become happy or healthy or rich. But the storyteller knows that you have to live day by day and enjoy each single moment. And although she doesn't always succeed in it, at least she's trying. Because our lives may turn out to be unpredictably short. And our guardian angels, no, they're not white-haired, they're grey-haired. And each of them has many medals for courage. The storyteller loves to welcome visitors. And there are many people who are coming to her home to listen to a story, because everyone hopes vary his or her own story. And most of the people who are coming to the storyteller's home have wounded hearts. Someone is burnt with anger. Another is suffocating with hurt. And someone is losing faith. And then the storyteller looks at all these hearts. And in each heart, in each wound, in each scar, she sees not darkness and pain, but she sees gentle light, the light of a guiding star, the truest guiding star in life. And at home, the storyteller has a big weaver's loom where she weaves her unfinished canvas. And the more the storyteller is weaving the canvas, the more the universe is filling with children's laughter and joy and love. But sometimes the storyteller has to go out for business. For example, she goes to search for the East Pole, and at the same time there comes running down from the forest a wild cat called Chaos, and it tears the whole canvas into pieces. And when the storyteller comes back home and she sees her work torn into pieces, she hears the universe filling again with wars and hunger and fear, and she looks at the work of her life torn into pieces. She shrugs her shoulders and her wings. But then there's nothing more else to do. She left. But to take a deep breath, to collect all the threads, and to start all over again, weaving the canvas from the beginning, 100 times, 1,000 times, but still continue weaving. The storyteller knows that every time when she is telling her stories, they dissolve into the air like sounds. For some, the stories will caress their hearts so that their souls start to purr. And for others, they will go unnoticed, because the storyteller knows that you can't give people wings. They have to grow their own. And if you ask the storyteller, then she will tell you that everything that you have just heard is pure truth. Thank you. Well, I can't see you, but luckily I have good imagination. I wrote this story about 3 years ago, in 2017, shortly after my daughter was born. And suddenly everything became clear to me. We, the storytellers, do. And now I will play you a tune on the instrument which my little daughter loves particularly. And this instrument is called the double in Greece, or the double flute. Don't try this at home. And my little daughter also loves this instrument very much. Well, and as I said, I come, or rather my roots, they come from quite far away, quite a small town in Russia, which is called Tula. And that's also where the famous gingerbread comes from, and the samovar to make tea with. And also in this town there used to live amazing blacksmiths and jewelry masters and all kind of craftsmen who could do amazing work. And for example, some time ago there used to live a man, and by the way he was left-handed, who could even put horseshoes on each single leg of a flea. Yes. And later this flea, it was exposed in the town museum, and you could see it watching through the magnifying glass. But later, in the beginning of 20th century, the revolution came. And as it happens very often with all kinds of revolutions, suddenly the most beautiful and fragile things just disappear during the revolutions. That's why also the flea disappeared, and it's not there in the museum anymore. But luckily, in this town there are also now amazing craftsmen who can engrave the whole landscapes or portraits on the tiny grains of rice or beans. And these tiny masterpieces can also be seen now in the Museum of Tula, and have to look at them through the magnifying glass. So that's where all my relatives live. Well, I was born in Estonia. It's a beautiful, beautiful country. I hope you have a chance to visit me here one day. And now it's quite late here in Estonia, but it's very light, because in summer we have the white nights and it really never gets dark. I hope to tell you later some more Estonian stories as well. But now I have a very special story for you, which is very dear to me, especially now. And thinking about this story, I also wonder, what if we were afraid to offend another person as much as we're afraid to infect him or her nowadays? So here's a story. Long time ago, the people in the countryside used to live together, several generations under the same roof. That's why there weren't so many lonely people back then. And even if someone had to spend their old age alone, the whole village offered their help. The children came to bring food and clean the old person's house. The village children particularly liked to visit one lonely old man. Not only did he know many stories and legends, but he also crafted and gave children beautiful toys. Oh, what wonderful toys they were! Tiny birch bark houses, fine-legged horses, birds made from real feathers, and clay figures. Children loved so much to play with these toys. But all these toys were very fragile, and they broke easily in children's hands. Then the children cried, and this unsettled their parents. Once, the parents of this village went to the old toy master, and they told him, "Thank you for making and giving our children these beautiful toys. But please, can you make them stronger so that the toys don't break and our children don't cry?" And the old toy master said, "My toys teach something very important to our children. the time will come when your children grow up and someone will give his or her own heart to a child. And the heart of a loving person is much more fragile than any of these bubbles that I make. Well, I hope that you liked this story. I can't hear you, but luckily I have a good fancy. So, finally, I'm going to tell you one last story, and also I'm going to show you one Estonian instrument. This instrument here is called Estonian Cannell. It's very similar to psaltery. And this particular instrument was made very recently for me by a very famous Estonian master, and he carved some birds here on this instrument. I love it. So today, of course, I won't be able to play all the instruments that I usually play, but I hope that maybe we'll meet some other time as well. So I'm going to tell you another one of my stories, which I wrote recently in December, especially for the storytelling evening and the presentation of my third storytelling album, which is called The Bird's Tales. And although there are no birds in this particular story, but at least there are birds on the instrument. And this story appeared after I watched the news. And then I thought, what if there was an absolutely happy, an absolutely good, like happy story? And then I thought, well, that would be boring probably, because, you know, there should be tension, there should be some friction in the story. But that's interesting that why so many people think that a really happy story would be boring. So here is a story for you, which I call the absolutely happy story. Once upon a time, there lived a king and a queen. They were both young and happily married. And one day, the queen gave birth to a beautiful daughter, the little princess. And the queen even didn't die during the childbirth. To celebrate the birthday of the little princess, the king and the queen invited all the good fairies of their kingdom, and also They even didn't forget to invite the evil witch, who usually no one wants to invite to any parties. The king and the queen gave the best place at the table for this evil witch. And when the witch ate well and drank well, it was her turn to bless the little princess. The evil witch stood up and she went to the cradle. The witch looked into the cradle and suddenly she loved the little princess so much that the evil witch made sweetie, 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 sweetie to the little princess and blessed her either with the attractive appearance or with the witty mind, at least with something which is very useful in the household. The princess was growing very fast, and she wasn't spoiled at all. She was brave and gentle, and she loved music and was masterful in handicrafts. She loved particularly sewing, and every time at work she would sing a song. Sometimes, while she was working, the princess would, prick her finger with a nail. But nothing bad happened. The princess didn't die nor fell into the mortal sleep. And sometimes there would come some wandering old lady towards the castle with a red, ripe apple, and the lady would give the apple to the princess and say, "Eat the apple, you sweetie, sweetie, sweetie." And the princess ate the apples and nothing happened. She didn't die nor fell into the mortal sleep. And when the princess turned 17, she found a pen friend. It was a prince from another kingdom. And a year later, the prince came to visit the princess, and she liked him so much. It turned out that the prince was even better than she imagined. So the prince proposed the princess to marry him, and the princess agreed. The king and the queen had nothing against it, and soon they married each other. at first, the prince and the princess rented a little castle nearby, overlooking the green meadows. But then, during their honeymoon, there came a dragon, a real dragon, a fiery dragon. You know what a dragon is? Well, a real fiery dragon with 7 heads and 7 tails, and who even smelled like a dragon. But the dragon was also quite well-minded. He didn't kill anybody. The dragon just brought greetings to the prince from some relatives, and also a jar of apricot jam to the princess from his grandmother. Then the dragon kissed princess goodbye and flew away where he came from, so that the princess only had to open the windows and to air the castle a little bit. And soon the prince received a very good job offer. He was offered the position of a prince in a nearby kingdom. So the prince and the princess said farewell to the king and the queen. They promised to write letters often and to call every weekend or every day, and to come home to visit for the winter holidays. And the prince and the princess rode away. And then the king, now that he was absolutely sure that everything concerning his daughter went into the absolutely best way possible, the king, he went into his bedroom. Then the king looked under the bed and the king took from under the bed a tiny box with some carvings on it. The king placed the box on his bed and carefully opened it. And inside of the box there was a small rusty key. The king took the key and then he started to descend from the longest staircase of his castle into the deepest dungeons of his castle. And when he reached the deepest dungeons, he stopped in front of a door. It was an old door. It looked like nobody opened it for a very long time. The king took out his key and he placed the key into the keyhole. And then the king turned the key. Click, clock, And the king opened the door. And inside, there in the dim light, he could see someone. There was a human figure whose hands were tied together and whose mouth were closed and tied as well. The king came closer and he looked at this person, and it was a storyteller. Now, the king, he released the storyteller's hands, he released the storyteller's mouth, and the king looked at the storyteller and said, "Well, do you understand now how you should write the really happy stories?" Well, that's all for today. Thank you. And may the summer winds blow happiness, joy and bliss into the windows of your homes and into the doors of your hearts. And may you be happy and healthy. And may the people whom you love be happy and healthy as well. My deepest gratitude also to those who can support my storytelling and my work and my small family, especially now, in such uncertain and thus precious time of our lives. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you next time. Take care.
Did you enjoy that storyteller? Of course you did. And if you enjoyed it, like the minstrels of old, we're passing round the hat. And if you have some, whether it's paper or coin, our storytellers would appreciate what you put in. Every penny you put in goes directly to that storyteller through paper. All you have to do is go to worldstorytellingcafe.com. Click on today's stories or click on that storyteller and there'll be a hat below. the story. And you can just drop a little in that hat. Well, thank you for listening. And if you can afford it, we'd appreciate it.